This is Row Talk. I actually picked up skateboarding again very recently. So
Nice.
I did a little bit of it from grade 7 through 10-ish. And it was tough. I never could really ollie consistently. So now I'm kind of picking it up and it's getting a bit easier. And I find, let's see, as long as I do squats and lunges and those kinds of things to loosen up the lower back, that it just feels easier. Like I don't have to think about popping the board and doing the actual ollie. But um, yeah, so I plan to keep up with that. Um, I I met up with an old friend from high school, and he's a skater. So we he took me to a parking lot. We started practicing. Then he went into this bowl. You know, I didn't even bother trying going into the bowl because I know I'm gonna fall and I don't have a helmet or elbow pads or anything. So I'm sticking to flat ground and going over like low ridges if possible. But yeah, I'm really excited to get back into skating.
That's sick, man. Have you dropped in ever? Like on a quarter pipe or anything like that? You
No,
know,
no,
where you're like standing on the coping and dropping in?
no. It's I went to a park that he took me to, my friend. Um, so it was too steep. I didn't bother, but I actually just stepped inside and tried to ride the curve up and down, just because I'm not used to being at an angle. Uh, so I want to get used to that before I dive right in, and I just really don't want to get injured. So I'm perfectly fine taking it slow, uh, sticking to flat ground. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the balance, eh? I find it's even worse the older you get. Because when you're a kid, you don't really care. But like
yeah,
now you fall, like I'll fall doing something and like scrape my knee and then you just have like a wound there for like it feels like 3 months. And you're like, come
yeah,
on, body, we used to be good at this.
yeah, man. It's I mean I have this. I don't know. You can kind of see it. I have this scar on my forehead here. I just woke up one day and it was red, and then it got infected because like it started getting swollen like this big. So the bump almost came to my eye. So I went to see the doctor, and this was probably almost 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half. And he just looked at it and said, "Oh yeah, that's infected. Here, use this cream." So I started using the cream, and it went away. And then I was just left with this almost circular scar. But now every time I look at it, I think, man, how certain was I that it was going to get better on its own, and how wrong was that? That now I have a reminder for the rest of my life.
You wait, so you just woke up and you have no idea what it was actually from?
No, my guess is either I hit my head on something at night or something bit me because it was literally there was nothing one night, and then in the morning it looked kind of like three bites. So yeah,
Some spider got you.
yeah. So but yeah, recovery is it slows down.
Yeah. No, it definitely makes you like think about things more. Like I remember when I had a brief stint in university where I wanted to get back into skateboarding and I did for a bit and then you just get like the occasional injury and it just takes so much longer and you're like, ah. But then like every time I walk by a skate park, I'm like, oh, I want to get back into skating again. And then I try it and I'm like, yeah, skateboarding's hard and it hurts.
Right? I
But
mean, I so I did it 3 days in a row. So the first and third day I was with my friend, and the second day I was on my own. And at the end of the third day, not even the end, like halfway through our session, I told him, I think I'm done. My knee hurts so much. But I took 2 days off, and today, you know, no pain, nothing. So yeah, it really comes down to if you really want to do it, you gotta like be disciplined. It's like you can't do it 3 weeks apart. You got to do it like a couple of days apart, maybe, or even better, do it every day.
Yeah, and when you're a kid, it's just like when it's summertime, you just go out whenever, and yeah, it doesn't even matter. You just have like all the time in the world.
Yeah. Now it's more like regimented. Like if I want to
You
do
you
something,
pencil it in
yeah,
to your
exactly.
schedule. It's like the most grown up thing ever.
No, we're
Penciling
not.
in free time.
We're not. We're not oldies. We just Google Calendar it in or Apple Calendar or whatever.
You know, we're still hip with the tech,
Yeah.
but you still have to
Who
schedule it in.
who uses a pencil anymore? I mean, come on. Yeah. So, but that's the thing. It's like if I want to skate, I know I have to make. I know I have to either run or do squats and lunges, that kind of thing, day before or the day after, or preferably on the same day. Because I mean, that's just the way I approach it. I figure that's a safe bet to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. Sorry, one sec. I'm gonna adjust this because the lighting,
Mm,
it's like really really bugging me, and
sure.
I'm a bit of like a stickler for that. So just give me 2 seconds.
Yeah. Are you mountain biking too? I mean, you are. How's that?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's fun, especially because growing up in Ontario, there is mountain biking there, but it's more like cross country stuff from what I understand. So it never really was like on my radar all that much. And then getting the job that I have now, working for Anthill Films, where we film mountain biking almost exclusively. Picked up a mountain bike here in Squamish, and in Squamish, it's like the Canadian mecca for mountain biking here between Squamish and Whistler. It's like the thing you do in the summer. Like every second car you see on the road has a bike rack on the back.
Wow.
And so it's a steep learning curve here, but it happens fast. Like you progress pretty fast because it's hard because there's not really like any. It uses like the ski rating system, so green circles, easiest, blue square, intermediate, black, double black. And then
Mm.
I think there's like some people put triple black on crazy things. But there's a fairly limited amount of green circles in Squamish. So right off the bat, you're like almost jumping into blue squares, and
Yeah.
from there it just gets like harder and harder. So it took me a little while to get a hang of it, but now that I do, yeah, I'm loving it, and it's so much fun, and it's a good workout too because unless you're like driving up and shuttling up and you have someone like giving you a ride to the top, you're pedaling all the way to the top of your runs. So you're
Yeah.
getting like, you know, anywhere from like 20 to 40 minutes of, or even longer than that, of cardio on the way up.
Yeah.
And then you're riding down. So yeah, it's a good way to like stay fit, but also have fun. It's kind of like running, but you get like a reward at the end instead of your reward just being getting back to your door. Which don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking running. I used to
Oh yeah.
getting out and running and stuff like that, but it's different, and it's nice to have that like adrenaline hit at the end of your workout.
So it's dangerous. Like you get hurt anytime, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like all that calculated risk. So
Yeah.
it can definitely go very wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm in the same position as you where it's like I'm trying to progress fast enough that it's fun and that I'm like scared because I think that's like not only healthy but makes it fun,
Yeah.
but also not killing myself either because even like breaking a wrist or something like that could mean like either not working or my job is more complicated and I can't be shooting and things like that. So it's like all those adult responsibilities where you can't really get that badly hurt. So it's finding that balance, but so far so good. I've had some bails, but nothing too bad. Fell into a bush last night, but it was a soft bush, so it just kind of gently caressed me and then I got back up and kept going.
That's good. I mean, yeah, it's those. I think it's those falls where you fall and you're like, oh, I'm okay, cool, let's keep going. Those are like those kind of define your risk threshold. And my guess is kids who do that on a regular basis when they're like 6, 7, 8, whatever, they're the crazy. Either they're professionals or they're the crazy stunt people.
Oh, it's hilarious because you can totally tell the difference between like people who grew up not in the mountains and came to the mountains in their adult life, like me and my fiance Alana, versus the people who like grew up in the mountains. Because you just see, you'll be huffing and puffing your way up the mountain, and like you'll just see this 7-year old just like ripping down past you, just like having a blast. So like the skill level is just insane. And yeah, there's just like world class athletes that have come out of this area because you just grow up and that's the thing you do, like you go out riding with your dad when you're young, and if you start when you're like 3 years old and you enjoy it and keep doing it, by the time you're competing in juniors and you're what, like 15, 16, you've already had like over a decade on a bike, which is insane to think about.
Yeah, I often think about professionals who all start at a young age, whether it's mountain biking, skating, basketball, playing chess, whatever it is. Like if you're elite, you usually start at a young age, and so I always think, what have I done since a young age that I would be extremely good at? And the only thing I can think of is using a computer, watching TV and movies, and reading. So these are all like passive, absorbing kind of things instead of producing something. So
Still valuable though, but just a different kind of value.
like I would say I'm if you need to organize something, like if you have a shelf, bunch of documents, anything disorganized, I'm your guy. Like I'll do it really well, but no one's hiring an organizer, It's like
There's probably some people that should though, to be fair.
that's the whole Marie Kondo thing, if you've heard of
Right.
her.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
Have you watched any of Marie Kondo?
yeah, I saw her show whatever it was 1 or 2 years ago where she goes to people's houses and
It's like tidying up with Marie Kondo or something like that.
yeah, and she's got a new show coming out soon.
What do you think of her techniques? Do they
I
pass your test as an organized person?
She changed the game, man. Like I upgraded my game because of her. Uh, like I have two sock boxes now. I fold it the way she showed it on the TV show. I fold my shirts the same way.
Wait, you fold socks?
Yeah, it's not really a fold. It's like it depends on the length. If you have like high socks, I just kind of fold them in twice so that it can stand like this.
Ah,
So if you put it in the box, then when I'm picking the sock, it's just grabbing it. But before I would stack them, right? So then you'd have to go and reach like this, and you're probably gonna mess up the sock pair below the one you want. So yeah, I've done that. I got a little like shelf thing with what do you say? In a closet you have the bar where you hang your hangers, but I got these two uh, fabric shelves that wrap around the bar, and then they give you some mini shelves. So I put my socks and underwear, those kinds of things in there.
that's
But
next
aside from,
level.
it's a little bit extreme, but I find it useful. Uh, but aside from those things, what I do find cool is that in the show they make a point, like when you throw away stuff, she does like she thanks them, she thanks the items. Um, so I kind of do that. Like if I'm donating something, before throwing it in the box, I'll just be like, I'll just try to appreciate it before I get rid of it, so that it, I feel like it helps build appreciation over time for whatever you do have.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I've only heard like what was the one expression she
Does
uses? I
it
haven't
spark
actually
joy?
watched the show. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, which I think is like it is valuable to think about. Um, and yeah, especially with like the whole new the trend with minimalism and stuff like that, I feel like she came at like the perfect time.
And she's a legend, like in my eyes, tiny legend.
You should get her on your podcast.
I guess. I mean, I don't know. I admire her from afar. I feel like, yeah, I think that would be cool, but she would have to come with a translator. I don't think she speaks English, or at least not in the show. I think she had a translator.
Okay. Who would be your dream podcast guest?
That's a good question. The way I approach it is, um, I don't know. So far, I've just been talking to friends. I think, generally speaking, I want to start talking to authors, like people who write novels, um, because I started writing myself. So I think that would be cool because I get to learn about how they write, talk about them, their career, whatever it is. But it's not time yet to start doing that because I want to get some more writing in so that I can actually say something useful. Like, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah, that's cool. Like I've heard of plenty a lot of the podcasts that I listen to, they started off the same way where they were learning, like there's one guy that I follow who's a cinematographer, and he was learning in the process of like learning how to become a professional cinematographer, and he started this podcast as a way to like talk to people who are already doing what he wanted to do in that field. And over time he just like picked up little nuggets here and there and just started using the tips and tricks and stuff like that, and basically just created his own like little forum to be able to ask professionals cool questions about, like he would just go out and like whatever roadblock he would hit in his own professional career, he would just ask podcast guests about those questions and like slowly kind of built up from there, which is a cool way to do it, honestly.
yeah, I think it's awesome. Um, I'm not really sure what approach to take. So far, it's been like this only works, the online thing, when like I already know you. We've hung out years before, whatever it is, so we have a relationship already. So it's cool. But if it was someone completely new, it's really awkward to like develop some kind of relationship electronically I'm not trying to make it an interview. It's like supposed to be like, yo, what's up? Let's talk about this. It's just cool. So I don't know. To answer your question, I'm not sure because like off the top of my head, I want to say it would be cool to talk to Malcolm Gladwell, the writer, the
Oh
author.
yeah, he's awesome. He's super fascinating to listen to. Like I've heard him on some other podcasts, and he's like kind of he's very like dry but also like pretty funny, but
Yeah,
just the way he talks is like really fascinating. Like
yeah.
he's
Have you?
so articulate that you're like, how do you speak English that well?
He's got a podcast of his own, Revisionist History.
Oh yeah, I've listened to a couple episodes of that. Although that was a long time ago, and I remember listening to the episode. It was one of the early episodes about Toyotas and their failing
The breaks,
gas
yeah.
pedal or the brakes. Yeah, it was the brakes, not the gas pedal. And I was driving a Toyota at the time, and I was like,
Oh no.
this is too real." Like, kudos to him. He made it very vivid with like the sound design and like the sound effects he had in there. But like hearing the actual like black box tapes, I was like, nope, this is too much, and I haven't gone back since. But I've been meaning to because like I've read some of his books, and he's a fascinating dude.
Yeah, his podcast is cool. I listened to it. He has a new season going on. He had 3 episodes on the Little Mermaid and how it's a terrible story, like so, or so he says. You know, I'm not claiming it's a terrible story, but he makes a convincing argument. So the premise is basically, um, you've seen The Little Mermaid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ariel, uh, okay. To be honest, I haven't seen it for a long time, so I'm just trying to repeat what I
Neither have
heard
I.
from the podcast. So I believe Ariel goes to Ursula to, switch her fins to legs so she can go on land and meet John, I believe, who is the prince. And Ursula, I believe she takes her voice or something, and she, and then she goes to land, and I'm not remembering the rest of it, but the the premise is basically how it's a terrible story, and he rewrites the story, and he gets voice actors like Jodie Foster and Glenn Close and Dax Shepard to play the parts of the main characters. And I gotta say, I think it's a better ending.
He's incredibly good at weaving stories too. Like a lot of, and I guess that's why he gets a lot of flack for some of his books because they're claimed, people claim them to be like too anecdotal, and that he like is so good at weaving story and manipulating emotion that he builds these arguments based off of stories and anecdotes and not necessarily as much. It's not as like fact based. But I mean, I kind of feel like if they're compelling, you know, to a certain degree. Like
Yeah.
I I I think at the end of the day, like you remember his books more than you remember reading like a textbook, and that's because he's got this ability to weave together story arcs. You know, he's more like he is a nonfiction writer, but he writes novels, you know?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, as far as I know, he doesn't write actual novels, but I get the idea you're saying. It's like he's making an assertion based on like evidence and anecdotes. Like, for example, he's well known for the 10,000 hour rule, which is from his book Outliers. So, as far as the actual number of hours, I mean, I don't even bother thinking about whether it's accurate or not. But as a general rule, it makes sense. You do something a lot, you're going to be proficient at it. And whoever does the same thing more than other people are likely going to be more proficient at it because you have more experience with it. So, I mean, that's what I like. It's just cool. It's just cool. I like how he just puts stuff together. I'm not saying I agree with everything he's written, but when someone can tell a narrative like that, it's cool for me because then I'm thinking how can I write like that, and not nonfiction books, but hopefully short stories and other that kind of stuff later on. So yeah,
He must have killed it with the five paragraph essay in high school.
oh yeah, man, I hated those essays.
It's funny to think that it is a skill that you pretty much don't use outside of academia, outside of
Hmm.
high school, even. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure people still write essays, but like now it's all just like articles or full on books.
Mm-hmm.
Like you never write like a traditional five paragraph essay anymore.
Essay. Yeah, I don't know what the purpose of that is, because what I always had trouble with was I was always focused on like grammar rules, so my writing would be so boring. It's like I still don't know when to use commas or how to use commas. I mean, in novels, authors take liberty and just throw commas everywhere, and it works. So I'm just gonna start doing that. Um, but yeah, it's weird. It's like if you're a really good writer, you break rules of English, but and you can get away with it. But if you're a terrible writer, you can't even write you probably combine 5 sentences into one without proper capitals and stuff. So I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, then you start getting into the realm of poetry, which like I haven't really dug too much into poetry, but I know that's kind of all about figuring out how the words look on the page, and you throw away all rules. Like it's solely meant to evoke emotion and whatever means you can. So you just throw away any rules at that point. Have you written any poetry?
I have. Uh, it's somewhere on my shelf, but I started writing poetry a while ago. I've written 7 or 8 poems, and they were all something that started with a vivid memory or a vivid, like a really strong feeling that I tried to put into words. And after having done that, I don't even think about those things anymore. Like, let me think of an example. I actually can't think of an example. 1 second. So, uh, okay, this one's called Manhood. It was written on Halloween 2018. The boy strives to be a man. He eats what a man eats. He says what a man says. He does what a man does. Uh, he becomes a man. Now there is nothing else to strive toward. So,
It's,
what do you think of that?
it's kind of like it heavy, I guess, in one way, where it's I don't know. Did that come from like a bleak place? Because it sounds like not depressing, but like almost
Real.
too real, but like too quick. Like it's just like building, and then done. You know, and
Yeah,
then it's like, where do you go from here?
that's exactly the point. Where do you go? The whole idea of that was, um, like, it's trying to capture a whole vibe in my kind of thoughts or experiences. So one is specifically, uh, in grade 9. I wanted to play football, a football team, and after the football season, they do workouts to prepare for the next year. So I did the whole workouts for whatever it is, 10 months or whatever. Then in grade 10, the season started, and then it was just rough. Like I didn't have a great time about it, so I just quit because the coach said, you worked hard, you can be on the team, but you're not going to play. So I decided, well, if I'm not going to play, why bother? So that specific one example is like, you want to be a man. It's like you want to be strong. You want to be what you think a man should be, and you just keep striving. You work out. Um, you eat to build muscle, do whatever, and then you do that forever. And then in my case, it's like you eventually realize, like, what is the actual goal here? It's like that it's not serving a purpose right now. It's like how you eat and keep your body depends on what you're doing. If you're just trying to be a man, what is that? So that was kind of the vibe of the poem. The idea was be practical. Don't try to reach for an idea that you can't even define.
Interesting. See, like I kind of saw it as more so like you're aiming for something for so long, and then you finally achieve it, which like I guess is kind of akin to, I don't know if you felt this way, but after graduating from like university, for example, because you're in school for like 12 years, and that's kind of the only thing that's like on, or I guess more than 12 years, like 15 to 17, depending on what your path is, and then you finally achieve that, And it's like both exciting, but then you have that like first day where the excitement has kind of like dissipated. You know, you've had like your fun party weekend after you graduate, and you're just kind of like, all right, life. What's this life
Cool.
thing about? Yeah.
Man, I didn't even have the party weekend. I felt that during the graduation ceremony. I was literally talking to someone and they were like, "Isn't this great?" or something like that. And all I said was, I felt more proud of my grade 10 art project. It's like it's not a knock on the degree or, all the effort that went in, but it was like art is just kind of different. It's like you see it, and when you put in hours and then you get a result, it's like, I don't know, it just had a bigger impact. But with the degree, it's like, okay, I have the paper, I have the degree, I did the school. Now I got to figure out what's next. It's like that the degree in itself isn't the reward. It's your starting point, which is so bleak when you think about it.
Yeah, but for the longest time, it feels like that's going to be the reward. And then it actually happens, and you're like, oh, okay, now I just keep moving forward, I guess. Figure out what's next. Because, yeah, I agree. It was satisfying, but like underwhelming to a certain point.
Yeah, I would say I was proud, or I was happy that I put in the effort to get through it. And I learned a lot about perseverance, hard work, and just doing whatever you need to do. But as like in terms of it being rewarding, it's not the same as landing an ollie or you know like drawing something amazing, writing a great poem. It's like you have to do, like, if I write a really cool program, I'll be like, okay, that's cool, I'm proud of that. But just learning a bunch of stuff and not doing much with it at that time, it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I feel like it has to do with when you make something, whether it's like creative or even if you're making a program or like a table, like you end up with an artifact of like your effort that is useful in some kind of way. Which I mean, I guess like the schooling's useful, but like it's more ceremonial than it is like an actual object or thing that like directly represents your effort. So I've always found that too. It's like just the little projects that I've pursued on my own have been so much more gratifying than like formal things in that sense, because you kind of have this thing that you've made and it affects other people in some kind of way, which I think is another big part of it. Is like when you make something that affects someone else and you can see how it affects them, then that makes it that much more rewarding and worthwhile, because otherwise it just feels not selfish, but you know, you're left with this feeling of like, okay, I now have all the tools in my tool belt, but that's what I have as a tool belt. Like I haven't like built anything yet, you know?
Yeah, it's
It's like I've just spent all my time like sharpening an axe, but like now I want to go chop down a tree.
I still feel like I'm sharpening an axe, and it's really confusing because like, just for example, in a job. So let's say, for example, in a team that builds a product, like an electronics product or something, usually you have the embedded programmer, you have the PCB guy, you might have the production team, the R&D team. So it's a team effort to build a product, get it out, troubleshoot it, keep revising it. So what people want in experience is a little bit of everything, or really specialized in one thing. Uh, I've taken the everything approach, so you dabble in everything, and then you you hope to get hired and do stuff. But the confusing part is when you do it that way, like your confidence that you can do something really well is low because you have such limited experience in programming and PCB design and troubleshooting that you're relying on someone to train you or at least be aware of that. And I think that works in some jobs. But with this whole COVID thing, I've seen job descriptions are less training friendly and more like you got to have this, you got to have 5 years of experience, you got to have 10 years of experience. So anyway, I don't know how I got there, but yeah.
No, I never really thought about that with the whole working remote thing because I remember being at co-op jobs where the bulk of my learning, whether my boss liked it or not, I mean, my bosses were usually awesome people, but like the bulk of my learning happened when I would just like spin around and tap them on the shoulder and ask them like probably the most entry level dumb question there is, and they would still take me seriously enough to answer it. But you're not gonna like hop on a Zoom call to be like, hey, I can't set up my programming environment. Can you help me? Like you just feel like you should know those things. So yeah, I guess that skews it where like you have to have more experience because you're working remote now. Like you don't really have the entry level jobs. I feel for all the people who are just graduating university in the past couple of years because it would be a very weird job market to get into. Like I can't imagine having my first job after university be a remote job
Yeah.
and like a remote skilled job where like you're trying to gain new skills while
Yeah.
simultaneously having no idea what you're doing and impressing your boss who you have like one chat with per week.
Yeah. And you've never
It
met in
sounds
person,
so
probably.
stressful.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy stressful.
So I'm just gonna do a pivot here. So you're back in Canada. You're in BC.
Yep.
Um, how was the quarantine? Like, what did you do? And did you have to stay away from people for 2 weeks?
Yeah, so we did like we landed in Vancouver and immediately had to go and do 3 nights in a hotel, which was like we went for the cheapest option, which probably wasn't the best call, but there's some pretty funny stories. It was attached to a Chinese food place, and I'm pretty sure it was owned by the people who ran the Chinese food restaurant next to it. And with the quarantine hotel, it's more expensive because they charge like quarantine rates. So what would normally be like a $90 per night hotel room ends up being like $500 per night for 3 nights for the two of us. Yeah, so and then and then we just got served like the funniest like I love Chinese food, don't get me wrong, but like having only Chinese food for like 3 days straight it was a lot of Chinese food. So yeah, we luckily the way it works is we got our COVID test as soon as we landed, and then you're actually good to leave your quarantine hotel as soon as you get your positive result back from the one you took upon arrival. But
Or
the
do you
frustrating
mean
part is,
negative result or positive
sorry,
result?
negative
Yeah.
result. Yeah, negative. Um,
Okay.
and so the frustrating part though is that once you get your negative result, even if it's early, you you can leave, but you've still paid for all 3 nights, and they don't like refund you, which is sort of frustrating. But we were happy to get out of there, and then luckily the place that we did the 3 days or 3 nights, and then the remainder of it we did in Airbnb in North Vancouver, and we were stoked when we got there because it was like the basement of a house, but it had like full windows, and we were looking out onto like a green backyard. So we were inside all the time, but at least we had like some fresh greenery to look at. And they even like set up a little corner for us to like chill outside in, and they were awesome hosts. So no, the quarantine was all in all was actually pretty good. But I could see, depending on your situation, if you ended up in like a not so great place for the 2 weeks, it could
Yeah.
be a little um, could cause some cabin fever. But luckily, we were able to have like a little sectioned off spot where we could chill outside occasionally. And I started doing remote work, just like editing for the company that I work for now while I was in quarantine, so that I'm like the kind of person who goes mad stir crazy. Like Alana's normally she can last longer than I can, but I get cabin fever like real quick, so it was good to have something to work on with those guys with editing and just have a little bit of structure to the day, because otherwise you just kind of get into like a weird like I'm the type of person who enjoys routine, because otherwise I just go like off the rails and I don't want to do anything, you know?
Mm. Yeah, man. I'm glad it went well. I haven't had to do a quarantine, but yeah, like I don't think it would be hard to not go outside for more than 3 days. Like, I go outside basically every day, even if it's a short walk, just the fresh air, just meeting random people in the neighborhood, say hi. That's always nice. And I'm glad it went okay for you.
Yeah, I will add that I'm okay, like quarantine was, I feel like, the least, like the smallest price I could pay for the fact that I got so lucky and just happened to be in New Zealand
Oh
during
yeah.
COVID, where like we were living normally for a while, and I didn't like we did a lockdown for like 6 weeks, but for the most part it was normal and we could hang out with friends and things like that. So yeah, we had like no problem doing the quarantine, because like we felt super grateful that we kind of lucked out and avoided COVID altogether. So we kind of saw it as like our COVID free tax, where like this it was just a very small price to pay for a very fortunate year of COVID free. So
Yeah. It's been crazy. It's still there. Like it's been almost 2 years
yeah,
since it started, and but yeah, I just wanted to see how that was. And um oh yeah, so your vlogs you used to do, they were, as far as I can tell, travel vlogs you did with your fiance Alana, right?
yeah.
Uh, and I watched a couple of them, so I would like to go
How far
back.
back did you go, out of curiosity? What ones
Uh,
did you watch? Can you remember?
I watched some of the early ones. There was one where
There's
you guys were walking around, I think in Vancouver. I'm not sure. But they were some of the early ones. I think I haven't watched the newest ones. I presume they're more like produced and they look nicer. Um, but I always like to go back and see like how did this start?
Yeah, oh, they definitely started off pretty cringy. That's for sure. Like I can't go back and watch them. It's just like, oh god. But that's just the learning process.
In one of my earlier YouTube vlogs, I pretended to talk to a tree, so it'll be fun to go back and see that one. I wrote a skit. I was like, oh, I think I can be funny. I wrote a skit and pretended to talk to a tree and made some jokes. And then I watched it and I was like, oh, there's a whole production to this being funny because like you can barely hear what I'm saying. It's just so funny.
It's all part of the learning curve, man. But yeah, some of this stuff is like, I don't know about you, but I'm like the type of person, when I make something, I just post it or do whatever I need to do with it, and then I never want to look at it again.
Oh
I
yeah,
just like I just tend to move on.
mm, um, I guess I'm not like that. I haven't gone back and listened to my podcast, but the whole premise of it was to go back and listen to it. So, like for example, um, if if we don't talk for whatever reason for a couple of years or something happens, I'll go back and be like, okay, I'll just give you this specific, exact, intense, extreme example. And like, if I talk to someone and then like decades later or whenever, hopefully decades later, they die or something, I'll be like, all right, I can go back and listen to this conversation. I have a piece of history with between us. So that's I think that's a useful thing. Um,
It's a cool way to look at it, like an archiving tool.
yeah, it's that's the best way to put it. It's an archive. It's a diary kind of. It's a conversation. Um, but yeah, as far as the vlogs, I have gone back and watched some of them. I kind of like embarrassing myself, but I think it's good because you can see how far you've come. But I definitely don't do it regularly. Like I'll probably go through a phase every year or two, maybe for a couple of hours, and I'll just watch some old videos of myself.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, like, having the memories on your phone where it's like 6 years ago this week.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's kind of fun because I don't actively think to do that. But I'm sure, like, a decade from now, when Alana and I hopefully have like a family, we can show kids those cheesy videos and they kind of be like, it's the same way that like home videos age. And they're so bad, but then they become so good. And you don't care that they're bad because it's like you said, it's just that like memory archive. So I'm hoping that'll happen. Like I'm hoping it's like a fine wine and eventually like I can look at them not as like, because when you're too close to them still, you look at it and you just see like, oh, this is what I did wrong, or like, oh, I'm so much better at doing all these technical things now, and if I did that again, I'd shoot it like this and all that stuff. And so they almost feel like a little embarrassing now, but 10 years from now, like there'll just be a point where I'm far enough away from it that it's no longer like embarrassing, and more so I'll be hopefully happy that I just have those clips. And I think that was the original idea at first. That's how it started. And then just me and my personality, like I just kept wanting to make it better and better
I can see that for
until
sure.
I until I was like, all right, I don't want to do engineering anymore.
Oh
It just
damn.
the obsession took over.
Mm. Yeah, man. Distance uh, creates nostalgia in all respects. Even a simple thing like if I watched a video of me 10 years ago and I just said the words MSN, I'd be like, oh yeah, that was the thing. Like, it's not there anymore. So who knows if Zoom will be there in 10 years? Is it going to be some other company or just mentioning um, skating or mountain biking? Like I went more than 10 years between skating. So this could be a long-term thing. It could be a fad. I don't even know. But if it is a fad, I'll be like, oh yeah, I'll have a chunk of memory. It's like I did these things when I was skating. So yeah.
And then like a decade from now, you'll go through another skating phase.
Yeah, every
And the
10 years.
cycle continues
Yeah. And then you'll be telling me that
until
you
you're like an
took up
80-year-old ollie.
oh, that would be unreal. That would be amazing. An 80-year-old Ollie. But yeah, so those vlogs then were kind of to capture your travels and they just turned into your filmmaking career basically.
Yeah, so basically, Alana and I met when I was working, or when we were both working at a startup. It was like a Kickstarter funded startup making a 3D printer.
Oh,
And did that. Like I worked there for probably, what was it, like almost 2 years, a year and a half, but like crazy hours. Like it was all I did was work on that. And it ended up flopping, and we didn't deliver the Kickstarter, and a bunch of, yeah, there was just a bunch of mistakes made because we were young and didn't know what we were doing and things like that. And so the company ended up flopping, and I was like crazy burnt out on engineering. And Alana and I were like, all right, let's just not get jobs. Let's take this summer, just travel around Canada. Like, neither of us had really driven across Canada and seen like large chunks of Canada. So we decided, I like converted the back of our SUV into like, I made like a bed frame in it,
Yeah.
that we could sleep inside and like store things under. And so we could basically drive around and park in like Walmart parking lots and sleep in it, for free. And then that way, like it was budget enough that we could then travel for longer, really like stretch out our travel budget. So we ended up staying on the road for 4 months. We did 3 months in Canada and a month in the States. But when it started, I don't know how I actually got into it. I think Alana was watching vlogs at the time, and I wasn't really like that into vlogs, and I had never really like picked up a camera at that point. But we were like, hey, like maybe we'll just like make vlogs of our road trip and just send them back to family so they can see what we're doing, beyond like the occasional, FaceTime chat. They can see like where we've actually been hiking and like what we've been up to and what it's actually like, some of the moments of living out of our car, some of the glamour of like crawling out of your car in a Walmart parking lot at like 7 a.m. and there's like a family walking by getting ready to do the grocery shopping, and you're like in your underwear and you're like, hey, how's it going?
That's funny.
So like there was some like really awesome moments, some really funny moments, and just like borderline sad moments as well. And yeah, we just originally wanted to document that, and then one thing led to another, and like I tend to obsess about things, so I just kept wanting to like keep filming and keep making it better. And I was getting into like the photography side of things as well, because we were posting to Instagram. Yeah. And then we were like trying to turn this into a little bit of a business, because at the time we wanted to be nomadic and living on the road and be able to travel wherever we want, and just like make videos and edit them in coffee shops and stuff like that. Never quite got to that point where we were getting any money off of it. Like I think at the end of the road trip I was starting to make like $5 a month from Google AdSense.
Okay.
Yeah, so like very, very small. But by the time we were done the road trip and we like settled back in Toronto area, I think I surpassed 100 posted videos at that point. Mm-hmm. So it was just a really good excuse to just like put in the time with the editing and the shooting and like learning how cameras worked and stuff like that. And I had so much fun doing it that when we got back, I was doing contract engineering work, because I wasn't earning anything off of video. So I needed like a job to pay the bills. And so I was working, and I was doing engineering work specifically for music related applications, so like making like synthesizers and things like that, which was really cool. Like once upon a time that would have been my dream job, because I had produced music like all through university and was really into like synthesizers and stuff like that.
Valence
and so
is a great name.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Yeah, maybe I'll revive it one day. So yeah, it was kind of this weird moment where I had a dream job doing what I would have loved to do throughout university, but it was still engineering. And then I was at this crossroads where I got back from this trip, and I really loved filming things, and I enjoyed like the creative side of it, and just like how quickly I could just go out, shoot something, edit together, and then it's that whole thing of like you've created something, you have something to share and put out in the world. And I just got really addicted to it. And I was making a bunch of little videos on the side of doing engineering work. And eventually I started reaching out to little restaurants in Toronto, being like, hey, I'll come by for an afternoon and shoot a chef at your restaurant making a dish, and I'll do it for free, and I'll just like cut together a little Instagram video for you, just like a 30-second thing.
Yeah.
So like I would just send out, like I probably sent out at least like 50 to 100 different Instagram messages, essentially just saying like, hey, I think your Instagram feed could use some video, let me come by and shoot for free. And the good thing is when you tell someone that you'll do it for free, like A, they love you because it's costing them nothing, and B, there's like no expectation. So it
Yeah.
removed a lot of like the nervousness of working for a client,
Yeah.
because I was like, at the end of the day, I could show up and like my camera could malfunction, or I could shoot it and it just looks awful and it's not even worth posting, and it wouldn't matter because it's not like they paid me. They weren't out anything.
Yeah.
Like the only thing they were losing out on at that point was like maybe the dish that they were making.
Yeah.
But the chef would normally just eat it right after. Sometimes I'd get like the free meal out of it, which was cool. So I started doing that, and then I got to a point where I felt comfortable enough, showing up to a restaurant, engaging with like whoever the chef was or like the owner was from like a professional level, because I had never really done anything on my own to that degree. So like a lot of the learning curve was, and I'm a pretty introverted dude as well. So a lot of the learning curve was like just getting over the fear of like getting out there, presenting myself as like a professional videographer,
Yeah.
having people look at you knowing that you're supposed to know what you're doing. But at that point, you still have like the imposter syndrome where you're like, well, I don't really know how to do this. Why are they looking at me like I'm the expert? So it was like a really good learning phase. And then I got confident enough to just start charging like a small amount. So I'd start doing videos for like $100 or $200. And at that point, I had just enough on my Instagram and in my portfolio that when we decided to leave and go to New Zealand, I was like, okay, I think I'm done officially with the engineering stuff now.
Mm.
And when we ended up in Queenstown, I reached out to a bunch of production companies, and luckily, one of them, who I ended up working there for 2.5 years, they liked the little videos I had made and were happy to take me under their wing and teach me, because I was still pretty green at the time. And yeah, one thing's led to another, and now I'm back in Canada shooting mountain bikes. So
Man, that's
all
so
kind
cool.
of a blur. It makes a lot of sense when I lay it out like that, but it did not feel like it made that much sense at the time.
Mm. Because you're uncertain, right? You're like, this, I've put in so much energy and time and money into this engineering degree, and I've already done all this work, and I'm really good at it. But this other thing is kind of fun. It's cool. It's like, can I really make money here? Yeah. I mean,
And there's
yeah.
the whole idea of like not feeling the imposter syndrome, which stuck around for a while. Like I feel like with shooting video, like I've only kind of recently felt like I have overcome it and feel like I really know what I'm doing. Even though like I was still able to, I was still making fairly good work and like felt confident with clients. Like there's still that like nagging voice where it's like, oh, you've only been doing it for a couple years, you didn't go to school for it, you didn't, all these like little negative thoughts. But it just takes a little while when you're shifting careers like that to feel comfortable in your own skin and kind of accept that that degree and that formal education, it still helps. And it helps me a lot with the technical side of filmmaking, and there is a lot of technical knowledge and skill that you need to have for certain elements of filmmaking, like post production, and even while shooting there's a lot of technical stuff with the cameras, so like having the engineering background has definitely helped a lot with that. But it's nice to just be able to play with a camera and create things for a living now. Whereas engineering kind of, I know a lot of people still feel that way about their engineering jobs, but it kind of lost that for me for a little while there. And it just kind of felt a bit too much like a 9 to 5 job. It also helps that I picked up a camera during a time that was like one of the most fun times of my entire life. So
Right.
speaking of like nostalgia, I just look back at that time with nothing but like good memories, and so it's kind of infused with learning how to shoot video, and so in my mind it's good memories, and
Mm.
I've just kind of like stuck on to that path.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I've struggled uh, with that forever. It's like, to me, doing fun stuff and earning a living have never really overlapped in terms of conceptually. It's like you got to work to earn a living, and then you go and try to land an ollie. You got to go do your job. You got to do some customer troubleshooting, and then you can go watch a movie. Uh, so yeah, it's like it's hard. I don't think it's possible to ride that balance forever, where you can separate what it is to earn a living and what it is to have fun. It has to overlap eventually, but the degree to which it overlaps is different for different people. Like for you, obviously now it's overlapping a lot because you love editing and shooting and filmmaking, and you're also making a living from it. So yeah, I think I'm kind of following that approach, like doing this podcast. It's like I'll do whatever's fun when I can, and hopefully it leads to some income. But if not, there's something that I know I can do for others, like for a company or on a team or something. So usually when I talk about this, or if I think about it, I feel embarrassed because it's like, oh, you're supposed to love what you're doing, but that's just not the case as far as I can tell for most people. Um, Most people that I have met in my jobs throughout the years, it's like there's always people who are really passionate about whatever job it is they're doing, but there's a there's many people who are who are there for the money. They have to support their family, and you can tell. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't know. I mean, I just think, yeah, hopefully those things overlap eventually. But it's cool that it's doing that for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, and I mean, I would like to add as well that I'm lucky enough to have the privilege to and the space to explore, or I did have like the space to explore a new path, because
Mm.
for a lot of people it's like you kind of you get onto a trajectory, and that's just like the path you have to take because you have necessities that you have to attend to. And I was fortunate enough that I had that space and time to go on that road trip, live out of my car and figure things out, and have, yeah, the ability to kind of like look into what I wanted to do next, and make a choice. Like a lot of people don't even have a choice with what they're doing. So I'm incredibly lucky in that regard. And yeah, I try to remind myself of that as much as possible, especially because, like, as much as you know, you love what you do, at times it can feel tiring and it can feel like work. But at the end of the day, like, I have this ridiculous job that I don't know how I ended up with it.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I don't think it's, I think it's one of those things where it's like you're lucky if you can find, if you stumble upon that thing that you can make work as a living as well. But then it also, the reality is it also does change your point of view or your relationship with it. So, you know, you might write poetry in your spare time for fun as something just for you. And then if you became, like, you know, a poet and you had certain obligations and you were writing, you know, for other people or for clients, or, you know, you're a copywriter or something like that, it changes your relationship with it to the point where it's like, yeah, you love what you do, but then you just get new hobbies on the side. So it's like it's still ultimately like a work relationship with hobbies on the side, but at the same time, yeah, being fortunate enough to have that choice, um, you know, I felt like I had to embrace it and just like go for it, because not everyone gets that chance. So
Yeah. So what kind of projects are you working on? You mentioned you guys do like mountain biking projects at Anthill was the name.
yeah, yeah. So I'm actually working largely on one of their big clients is Shimano. They make like all the bike components, brakes, drivetrain, you know, all the componentry for bikes. And so we're shooting anything from small little social media clips all the way up to brand videos, mini documentaries,
Oh,
anything in between. So we're essentially, or I'm essentially on the team that's doing all the North American content for Shimano. And
okay.
then another part of the company is the occasional commercial film that comes in. And then there's also, they make feature mountain bike films. So, like, you know, hour and a half long mountain bike films, with various athletes, or, you know, the one that's coming up is more of like a personal story. That'll be really cool. So yeah, it's really just like a toss up of a bunch of different styles of films and videos, all kind of revolving around mountain biking or biking in general. You know, like we're working on a brand film for, specifically for road biking, for example. So it's all kind of disciplines of biking. Some things are about specific athletes. Some things are about, you know, product campaigns. It's kind of a toss up of everything. Some stuff in the studio, some stuff we go out and actually shoot, you know, mountain biking and Squamish up on the mountain. So
Hmm.
it keeps it nice and varied. And I'm doing a combination of shooting and editing as well.
Yeah, that's cool. You know, I always thought of filmmaking as making movies, but yeah, it makes sense that if you have clients, you're making uh, maybe like Instagram clips or Twitter clips, YouTube clips, uh, like 10 to 20-minute YouTube, maybe profiles about a biker or a specific bike or something. So that's cool. There's got to be a lot of variety, like whether you want to showcase a rider or a piece of equipment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool because it's a varied experience too, as far as the skills. Because one day I might be shooting a product shot of like a new shoe that's coming out, and you know, so then you're doing product videography, which is completely different than, you know, shooting a documentary, because with product stuff you're setting up lights in a studio and you have to really focus on like the small little details and the way like the lights wrapping around a certain part of the shoe, and you're like getting in there and like making sure everything's like perfect and you're taking the time, and it's almost like a meditative process because you actually have the time to just like look at the screen and think like, what would I make better? I have it in my ability to like tweak those things now. And so you can really kind of play around with light and experiment. Whereas something like a documentary, you're not really, you're trying to shoot what looks best in that light. You know, you're working with what you have, but you're generally more focused on like what you're actually shooting, making sure you're getting certain moments, making sure you're getting reactions, events that like might only happen once, and if you're not rolling and have your camera pointed in that direction, you're going to miss it. So it's just like a different mindset, which is nice. It keeps it fresh. And it's the same with editing as well, because some product stuff you might take, you might just have a different edit where it's almost a bit more of a chill edit because you're not really thinking all that much. You're just kind of putting together things that look nice. Whereas something like a documentary or a brand film can be a lot more intense because you have to like sit and be with the footage for long enough where you understand all the little pieces of the puzzle you have before you start putting together the puzzle. And then putting together the puzzle is a whole process in itself because you're just kind of, you don't know what, it's like having the pieces to a puzzle and you don't know what the final puzzle is supposed to look like. So you're
Oh,
like
yeah,
just
right.
putting things together and you're like, oh, that section fits together. That's nice. And you're, so it's a lot more of an intensive process when it comes to editing. So sometimes it's nice to get like a product edit where you can just like chill and listen to music and just put together things that look pretty and not
Mm.
have to think too much. And then other times, if you've been doing that for a while, you want something that has a little bit more meaning to it, a little bit more, um, yeah, it's a bit more fulfilling that way.
So, my mom and I started this cooking channel on YouTube, and we film her recipes, and it's basically for me when I'm out and about and I want to cook stuff. So, um, and she knows that she's fine with that. So I've had fun filming. So we don't do too much fancy lighting. It's just kitchen lights, but you got to get the burner at the right angle. So I learned pretty quickly. If she uses her right hand, I got to be on the left side. Otherwise, it's going to block everything. Um, and then we do the 3, 2, 1, go, and then make sure there's a pause between go and whenever she starts talking. So yeah, it's been fun. I've had a lot of fun editing too. I'm doing those edits, and she makes a couple of craft videos where she like shows how she makes bracelets or necklaces or other homemade stuff with beads, and then also editing this podcast. I really like editing. It's fun. Uh, with the cooking videos, it's pretty clear what story you want to tell. You want to show in sequence from ingredients to the final product. Same with the craft videos and the podcast too, I guess. Podcast, there's not really any moving around the audio, but you can kind of overlay, like, you learn, like, at the end, it's, if you forget to say something, I'll just say, all right, just say it. I'll put it in post, it's like, so it's kind of cool. I've had fun doing that.
Yeah, it gets addicting too. Like it's just really gratifying when I found it got really addicting when I started shooting with an idea in my head
Mm.
of what I wanted to make beforehand. And then you kind of get, as you shoot more and more, you get closer and closer to that vision of like what you have in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And that part's really addicting because once in a while you come up with an idea and you're like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work. And then when you're editing it together and it actually does work, it's
Ah,
like,
interesting.
sick. I actually know what I'm doing.
My approach is very different. It's just like, let's just turn on the camera and then I'll figure it out at the end. Obviously, mine's not like high production stuff, so that kind of makes sense. You might have to storyboard things for a documentary, or I don't know what's. I'm just using that term loosely. I don't actually know what it means, but you're gonna have to plan it out if you're telling a story. But I'm curious. I have a question, which is, uh, so I also want to do some vlogs regularly of my own. These are more like, here's what I did this month kind of vlog. So I have some clips of me skateboarding, um, clip of some bookshelves in a store. So my idea is make a video, have some pictures, kind of like a slideshow plus videos, and then after I'm done with that, then I'm gonna just record some audio and kind of tell a story through the whole thing. So as far as length of clips, specifically, let's say I do a 30-second skateboarding clip. So, I'm just like rolling down the road. I do an ollie, I turn around and I roll back and do another ollie. So my tendency is to like stick with the action. It's like once you do the ollie, you just want to show that and move on. So I have some clips that are quick clips, but I also want to throw in longer ones. For example, if I want to talk more about it, you just if I can be engaging with my words, then I feel like it's okay to have not much going on if I can kind of wrap it up when the action comes. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I may have answered my own question, but yeah, what's your take on like having short bursts of action versus building or having like longer clips where nothing's happening?
It depends on the style of edit. It depends on a lot of things. If you want a video that's a bit of a slower pace, something that, if it's an explainer video, for example, where someone's trying to get information from the video, that might have a different pace than something that has action, like intense action sequences, like more of like a Red Bull video where it's just like all, intense action sequences. So it really depends on the style of video, but usually what people do, especially when you're starting out, so there's like A roll and B roll. I don't know if you've heard those
Mm-hmm.
terms
Yeah.
already. So, for example, if you're filming, that cooking, so like the talking to the camera would be like your A roll. And then usually what you do is you film all your A roll. So you would film all like the talking and the explaining, or like let's say it's skateboarding and you're talking about like how to ollie. You would film a shot of you talking about how to ollie, and that's like your master clip or your A roll. And then you go and you go, okay, now I know what I said. And you go and you film the specific things that you're talking about to lay over when you're actually saying it. So then that way the visuals align with what you're saying. And so that's like the B roll. And then the amount of B roll and the pacing of the B roll is usually governed by like either the type of the edit, the music you're using, or like how much B roll. Because sometimes, you might not have enough shots. So you might decide to drag one shot out longer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it depends on a lot of factors, but I would say usually shoot more than you think you need to
Mm-hmm.
and shoot longer clips if you can. Like it's okay to have like the occasional short clip because that adds like a quick cut and it's nice. But if you shoot something like someone rolling by on a skateboard, like don't just hold your phone here and get them to like rip by your phone because then you only have like 2 seconds of the skateboard whizzing by. Whereas if you like are focusing on them as they're rolling up and rolling by and you're following them, then you just have more options later. And worst case, like you can still just use the part where they're like rolling by. But if you do need a longer shot, then you have the longer shot. So yeah, it really depends. You kind of get a feel for it over time. And a lot of that comes with editing experience. So that's why it's awesome experience to be editing your own stuff in the beginning because you kind of see what you did well and what you didn't do so well because you are the one looking at it and you kind of have to like deal with or work around the problems if there are any. So
Yeah.
it just comes with time really and learning the pacing of an edit as well It's kind of it's similar to like learning music really. Like you kind of get a feel for the rhythm of it, what feels normal, what feels it's like a gut feeling. Sometimes like an edit feels too cutty, like way too many different clips, and it doesn't like sit right. And sometimes there's a specific moment where there might be like an impactful moment or something that you said that's important and you want it to resonate a bit more, so you might like bring the music down and hold the clip longer so that the person who's watching it is more focused on what you're saying versus like a bunch of action going on. But the basic recipe that a lot of people use for like YouTube edits, and it was like the recipe that I used for the vlogs as well for the longest time, is you kind of have like talking moment with any footage that kind of helps show what you're talking about. So like the vlogs, it would be like, hey, today we're camping at this spot and it's this beautiful lake located in this part of BC, and we're spending the morning here. Like I might show shots of the lake, shots of our campsite, shots of us making breakfast like overlaid on top of that. And then I would go into like a montagey bit of like, say we're going for a hike, then you bring in like music and no talking, and you just show a bunch of clips. So that's kind of like the basic formula, is like talking with some footage over top of it. Music comes in with like a montage of images. Music comes out, you have talking again. And those are like the basic building blocks. Like if you go back and watch any of those vlogs, you'll see it right away. It's just like talking music, talking music.
Cool. Now I'm definitely gonna go back because I have something to look for, so that's cool. And yeah, I think I'm gonna do it the hard way, which is like I'm just gonna do whatever, and then I can be embarrassed later and be like, oh. Uh, but like I'll definitely keep that in mind. I think it makes sense. I've made videos kind of like that where I'm talking to the camera and then I just keep the audio and then throw in another clip and then just get back to the main A roll. So I think that definitely works. But I'm trying to make vlogs that are kind of like they're supposed to be archives slash diary entries slash hey, these are the cool books I read this week or this month, or these are cool movies I saw and this is why I like them. So it's kind of like a mini pod, but I'm the only guest. And yeah, I'm gonna play around with that. But man, I have so many questions now about editing and music and whatever, and I feel like we just got to that after an hour and a half. But I mean, we'll just wrap it up. Maybe we'll do it another time, and I can put some work in and get some experience with that, and I'll have something to look at next time. But yeah, it was good to chat again after forever.
Yeah, man, it's good to catch up and see what you've been up to. And yeah, we should definitely do it again. However many, what it's been like 4 months. Just do it like three
Yeah,
times a year.
yeah, yeah. We can do that. We'll figure it out. After enough time passes, there are interesting things to talk about. This is Row Talk.